the intellectual godfathers of the so-called new right.
Curtis Yarvin.
Curtis Yarvin.
Curtis Yarvin.
Curtis Yarvin.
Operating in the shadows of the internet, needless to say, is a man called Curtis Yarvin.
This is Curtis Yarvin, the self-proclaimed intellectual.
I'm an intellectual.
And in this video, we will go over how this so-called philosopher has influenced the ideologies of some of the most important, rich, and powerful people in the world.
When you use the word democracy, of course, you're using a very, very loaded and complex word.
One suspects that democracy, whatever that means.
What meaning does democracy actually have?
Just like so many other rich people that are born into the upper class, Yarvin is no different. He was born into a wealthy family in Brooklyn and says his household was very liberal-leaning. In multiple interviews where he talks about his childhood, he discusses how his grandparents that were Jewish Americans claim themselves to be communists. Remember that he calls them that because he feels very strongly about communists and their existence in the world. His father worked for the US government as a foreign service officer or a diplomat, which meant his family was constantly on the road. I'm not sure why the people that benefit the most from the government want to dismantle the government. It seems to be a common theme.
But one of the basic principles of kind of the California startup way of thinking is just to realize it's way easier to create a new NASA than it is to fix the old NASA. And that principle extends sort of around the government.
The report shows that the incoming Trump administration could overhaul NASA with lofty goals like getting humans to Mars by the end of his term.
So you have this kid growing up with no consistent friends or community and being bounced around for most of his childhood. To add on to the constant change, he was skipping grades to the point where as a freshman in high school, he was only 11 years old. Most of Yarvin's childhood was focused on school because when you're on the road, you can't have much of a social life, so he leaned into it. So at the age of 15 years old, he joined the College of Johns Hopkins University as part of the mathematically precocious youth. If I had to guess, being 15 years old in a math program, it's probably not the best situation to make friends in college. I don't know if this plays a part in him transferring, but he ends up at Brown University in Rhode Island. His parents met there. They got him in on legacy admission. While doing research for this video, I've had to watch a lot of Yarvin interviews, and he never really credits his success to nepotism or the luck of being born into a wealthy family. Having the ability to take chances, such as switching colleges at such a young age, is a direct result of his family being wealthy. And I'd almost guarantee he does not think that, because he thinks people of low income or non-productive people of society should be turned into biodiesel. Yes, that's literally what he said. After graduating from Brown, he ended up at Berkeley for computer science.
This is something really short. This is dedicated to my mother, who's about to separate with her husband. Cleaning out old files makes me feel like Shirley MacLaine. Of course I was an Egyptian princess. Here are the credit card receipts from Henri's of Alexandria. It's strange, but once I must have thought all these papers were important. What did I expect to do with records of my past lives?
Being in the Bay Area in the early 90s and involved in anything computer related was a cheat code. The tech boom in the Bay Area that took place in the 90s churned out some of the worst people that we see sitting at the top of our country today. To name a few, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and there's so many more. Yarvin doesn't last long at Berkeley. He ends up dropping out to pursue a career in tech. Coming from wealth is not bad or wrong. The problem is people like Curtis Yarvin rise to power and then take advantage of people that don't come from wealth. And having advantages is okay. It's just use them to help people. So how did this spoiled brat with no friends, a love of math, and now a college dropout become one of the most influential minds of the modern day? Strap in, because there's a little craziness, but a lot of darkness. Curtis Yarvin was an early adopter of the internet. We're talking 1989, early 90s. The internet back then was not how we see it today.
It spans the globe like a superhighway. It is called internet. The net to longtime users.
Internet is a whole group of networks.
The net is made up of some 12,000 individual computer networks.
What was popular was forums, basically like blogging, except these were dark places on the internet. A large part of these forums was a place for white supremacists to recruit, connect, and build out their networks. These forums were insane. They had terrorist organizations talking in these forums because no one was policing the internet back then. One of the most important people he talks to in his young age is Glenn Reynolds. Glenn was a teacher that sparked this philosophy debate lord inside of Curtis Yarvin, and this would lay the foundation on what he thinks the world would look like now and in the future. Yarvin was introduced to two Austrian economists, Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard. Ludwig von Mises is a free market capitalist through and through. He believes there should be no government involvement or interventions because that will distort the market and the economy, and any involvement in the government will cause massive amounts of inefficiencies. Like every other capitalist, he has extreme criticisms of socialism, claiming that it will eventually take individual freedom and crumble economies. Murray Rothbard is an anarcho-capitalist. He believes all government functions and institutions should be privatized. And along with being privatized, every part of the market should be completely unregulated, because Rothbard and Yarvin both consider the state a monopoly and that private institutions will run more effective and ethically.
How do we finally establish the libertarian system or anarcho-capitalist? Now obviously ideas are the key thing. First you have to start off, you have to persuade a lot of people to be anarchists or anarcho-capitalists.
Yarvin was influenced and entranced by these economists and built an online persona off these ideologies. Because he got into the tech world early and worked as a programmer for a few years, he ended up being involved in a buyout. And that little bit of money allowed him to spend the next few years to just start shitposting on the internet for a living. Enter Mencius Moldbug, the online personality that Curtis Yarvin would hide behind that would spark a new political philosophy called the Neoreactionaries. This is where the story turns dark, because he doesn't just use these ideologies to run his business. He expands on them, radicalizes them, and becomes an extremist. Essentially, the US should be run by a king and that we should all kneel before him or else. And the person he had in mind originally to run the US was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs would berate his employees, had an insane ego, and even denied he was the father of his daughter for years. And he was extremely controlling, which is why he clashed with so many people in his business.
Steve got angry with everybody that worked with him. He was very impatient. He had a vision of what it was that you were supposed to be accomplishing it, and if you didn't do it fast enough or you didn't do it right enough, he definitely got angry. He threw things at people, nothing heavy, but he threw wads of paper at people, swore at people, criticized their clothing. He did all those things. For some people, it destroyed them.
Having Steve Jobs run the US would be absolutely insane. What I find crazy about this is he owned a company. It literally just never took off.
We need to redesign computing itself from a clean slate, and this time we have to get it right. I quit my job in 2002 to solve this problem. I finished the first full prototype of Urbit in 2013.
His company is called Urbit, and he started this company to try and recreate this website he used when he was younger called Usenet.
You're building the foundation for a larger and more interesting Urbit public community that will resemble Usenet. My dream of recreating Usenet is like my boyhood dream from the 80s, right?
Usenet was one of the earliest message boards on the internet, but it also had 4chan levels of insanity on it. A lot of weird things were being done and said on Usenet, and it should probably be left in the past. He started Urbit back in 2002, but it's pretty much been useless this entire time. I'd assume the only reason it's still going is because Peter Thiel is giving money to fund it. In his recent post on Twitter, he says his idea for Urbit is a place for people with a lot of power to discuss things anonymously. He says he knows people are more likely to say how they really feel if they're behind an alias.
The quality of that content ticks up another notch if the people in it are properly anonymized.
If you are not willing to say your thoughts in public, they are probably terrible thoughts. People who are in powerful positions, such as CEOs of these tech companies, should not be hiding behind anonymity because they will take advantage of it. When it comes to making choices for hundreds of thousands of employees, their decisions should be public so they can be held accountable.
If Amazon's such a great place to work, as you've said, that's what you hear time and time again from your team, why have your team in Coventry gone on strike so much?
I think it's important to note that we absolutely support their right to do that.
That hasn't answered the...
He believes the US should be ran as a monarchy because he says that's how businesses are run. And I wouldn't even have to make a video about him if he just turned into another debate lord Reddit cringe poster on the internet. However, because he was an early adopter of the internet, his ideologies spread all throughout Silicon Valley and has now even spread into our government, being mentioned and around people like Blake Masters, Steve Bannon, and JD Vance.
There's this guy Curtis Yarvin who's written about some of these things. And so one is to basically accept that this entire thing is going to fall in on itself, right?
You referred to JD Vance as, I think, as a normie. What do you mean?
I would say that the thing that I admire about Vance and the thing that's really remarkable about him as a leader is that I think that he contains within him all kinds of Americans.
He posts so much on the internet, it's the equivalent of trying to keep up with how much Elon posts on Twitter. There is just no way to go through everything this guy has said, so I've tried to hit some major points of his beliefs. Moldbug, remember, he's still hiding behind this name, so no one in the public knows who Curtis Yarvin is yet. Now, Moldbug is writing some insane shit on the internet. He believes that slavery is normal and has endorsed it multiple times. And the reason he says this is because he believes black people are born unequal to white people and they deserve to be treated as less than human. Thus his belief that they make better slaves than white people, so to him slavery is natural and correct.
So the thing is that basically the treatment of the freed slaves after the war,
his vision for San Francisco was to turn all of the people that were low income into fuel for the city to run on. Now he claims to be trolling with some of these things, but then he's also serious with some things, so it's really hard to pin him down on anything. And for San Francisco, he said he realizes that many people wouldn't be able to live their lives knowing that their city was run on genocide. So if genocide is not an option, he says to put people in solitary confinement and to avoid them going insane, give them VR goggles. Very normal, humane takes from this guy. This one is extremely dark, but it's important to know how he really thinks, and I don't think he's joking about this. But to continue on this idea of him being okay with violence, he talks about a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack where a man named Anders Breivik decided to bomb cars in Norway. After the bombs went off, he went to an island and shot up 69 people at a workers' youth league. He did this because he thought he was saving his people with the idea of killing as many communists as possible. This is very much to preserve European and white nationalist values. Mencius Moldbug covered this story the next day and said this act wasn't good enough because he didn't kill enough people. He said he should have killed more people on the left, but at least the one thing he did was shoot communists. Keep in mind earlier, he claimed his grandparents and parents were communists.
10 years on, Norway stopped to remember a day that brought the country to a standstill.
Now at this point, you might be asking yourself, why do I even care what this guy has to say? He sounds insane. I asked myself this throughout most of my time writing this video because he is insane and he is scum of the earth. He claims himself to be this sort of philosophical writer that equates himself to the level of William Shakespeare. The problem is, and I hate to say this, but he is important, and for the rest of this video, I will prove how much his influence is incorporated in the future of America. How did his views even spread so much to begin with? When he started writing in 2007, his views among tech libertarians in the Silicon Valley was taking off. He was writing these edgy takes about how to bring tech into the world and mold a future where these CEOs and massive tech lords could rule the country. These people that were reading his blog posts were tech CEOs, so of course they agreed with what he was saying. He also spoke their tech language, which resonated with them, and his writings had layers of topics of things they enjoyed, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and all things related sci-fi. It became popular among some of the most successful people in tech, so when people were going for job interviews, they knew they had a better chance of getting jobs if they could mention this guy's writings. It became this little inside community in the Silicon Valley where people would discuss Moldbug's newest posts. He had this insane idea that as a philosopher, he could write into the future what he saw. The issue is, the stuff he wrote about has become real life today. The world which we live in is a large part because of his writings. If you find this video interesting at all, please like and subscribe. I've spent too much time with my ears and eyes bleeding, listening and watching this guy, along with having to read about Austrian economics. I'm in shambles, but thank you for watching regardless. Okay, we are now at the point of when Mencius Moldbug becomes Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin embraces this and steps into the light, which will now bring his ideas mainstream.
In which my ideas get into circulation is actually mostly through the staffers and the kind of younger people.
At this point, they aren't just reading his pieces online. He is at the same parties in the same room with people like Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Blake Masters, and even watched Trump's inauguration at Peter Thiel's house. Let's talk about his mainstream ideas that we will see put in place in this upcoming administration as we slowly are pushed into a monarchy.
We're coming onto monarchy then, so your definition of monarchy is not necessarily a king or a queen. You mean a single individual who has real agency over the levers of the state.
Exactly. I couldn't define it.
One of the dumbest ones is Trump being a king. Yarvin absolutely believes we should have a king to run the US, but he outright says that he thinks Trump isn't the guy.
He can't actually do that much to it. And he can block things, he can disrupt it, he can create chaos and turbulence or whatever, but he can't really change what it is.
But the person that he thinks is the guy is J.D. Vance. You could argue this is a coincidence or Trump is just being dumb, and maybe that's true, but allow me to try to prove you wrong. A term that Yarvin created is rage.
Which is rage. And rage stands for retire all government employees.
Retire all government employees. J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Blake Masters, Donald Trump are all saying the same exact thing.
But another option is that we should just seize the administrative state for our own purposes. We should fire all of the people.
They want to fire all government employees and install people that only Trump trusts. This is also a play from Project 2025, if you know what that is. That's because a lot of the people that wrote Project 2025 are interested in Yarvin's work. This is exactly what's being done right now in the US with massive layoffs for federal workers.
And I wanted to come on here as one of the thousands of federal employees who lost their job with the federal government this weekend.
I served 14 years in the Air Force. I was a federal employee for over 6 years. That's over 20 years of my life.
And this was my dream job. And it's just being taken away by an administration who doesn't care about science. It doesn't care about people who might be homeless.
They're calling it to drain the swamp.
Exposing the corruption of the Washington Democrats, and we're draining the Washington swamp.
But this directly aligns with privatizing all industries. The term dark enlightenment is given to Yarvin's work to describe his idea of taking down social systems and becoming enlightened. These social systems that he believes are pushing progressive ideologies. He says the media and the universities are cooperating together to push certain narratives, and the people behind it he calls the cathedral. The cathedral is a bunch of people using their power to sway the media, which I find super interesting because he's friends with a bunch of billionaires. Elon Musk says he is dark MAGA.
I'm not just MAGA. I'm dark, gothic MAGA.
Dark enlightenment, dark MAGA, I mean, come on. A while back, Elon Musk tweeted, "Take the red pill." Curtis Yarvin is the one who coined the term red pill for conservative media. Now, I don't know how many things have to line up to acknowledge Yarvin's involvement with people in high power.
Is this concept of red pilling.
I accidentally red pilled myself.
You always have a red pill moment, whether it's suddenly you realize that your child at school is being called a different name that doesn't correlate with their gender, or you suddenly realize you got passed over at work for a promotion because you're white.
And these housewives who were red-pilled during the pandemic.
Elon voices a lot of Yarvin's opinions, which makes sense because he has a relationship with Peter Thiel as well. We have to assume that these guys are all in the same room together. A note on this I found funny is the director of The Matrix, where the term actually comes from when they say to choose the red pill or blue pill.
After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
She responded to a tweet between Elon Musk and Ivanka Trump where they mentioned taking the red pill, and she said, "Fuck you both." That's my goat. Yarvin constantly hides behind these philosophical takes and this constant banter of trying to confuse everyone on the idea of democracy.
Democracy has no power between the elections. Then ideally in an election, it has all the power. In fact, it has almost no power because actually it's like, I was used to
saying democracy can no longer be trusted and it will eventually fail. And all these guys repeating the same thing of what even is democracy?
Democracy with good government. When you use that word, you're using a very tricky word. When you use the word democracy, of course, you're using a very, very loaded and complex word.
One suspects that democracy, whatever that means.
If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have?
The reason Yarvin and many others talk like this about democracy is to change America's opinion, to try to push the idea of living under an autocratic monarchy under a bunch of tech freak billionaires. He has had the same opinions on all of these issues for the past 20 years. No matter how much he learns or reads, his opinions never change. That is the sign of a dumb person. Learning history and philosophy is to take pieces of it and try to make the world a better place for everyone, not just rich people, not just white people, not just the ones that obey you, for everyone. But what he is a coward. J.D. Vance, Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, Blake Masters are all a bunch of fucking cowards. They laugh at maiming and killing liberals and about how terrorists' one real issue was they didn't kill enough people. And then when in front of the public and can't hide behind technology and a keyboard anymore, they fucking crumble. Because their only way to exist in this life is to create a world that forcibly accepts them. They thought power would make them cool. They thought money would make people like them. But the sad truth is, they will always be losers purely because they are just insufferable, horrible people.